So, this is General Biology 1, BIO121, and I am not your official instructor, but this is going to be an introduction to the course just to get you started. So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about what the course is in terms of the topics specifically, giving you an overview of the whole entire course, really, and then kind of easing our way really into the first main topic of the course, which has to do with cells. All right. So biology is a study of life. All right. So all of our ologies are the study of something, and so this is the study of life. And this is General Biology 1. A lot of people try to wonder, what it's about. There are dissections. They ask all these things. And really, as the first course, I left out the Y there. As the first course in biology, what we're going to do is really focus in on the beginnings of everything and the most simplistic version of them, and that would be the cell. Okay, so I'm going to talk for a minute about something called cell theory. And before I really get into that, we're going to talk about this word theory and science in general. When you hear the word theory, a common use of that term is that it means what? Just an idea, right? As you're thinking, oh yeah, just have a theory about something. Well, the thing is, in science, we have a very different definition for the word theory. In science, a theory, hold on just a second here. There we go. In science, a theory is something that has been tested and data has been collected on to support that, okay? And the theory is an explanation, an accepted explanation of a natural phenomena. So you need to know that a theory in science is not just an idea. A theory is an explanation, and it is a supported explanation by data over time, and it is how we explain a variety of natural phenomena. One of the differences between a theory and a law really is just that a law, like a law of movement, can be defined in mathematical terms. Theories are typically more broad. They cannot be reduced to something so small and so specific. Theories are much broader and just require more of an explanation. But that doesn't make them any less valid or any less accepted than what we would call a law. So we have here something called cell theory. You can see, to go on to the idea here, how it's not just sort of an idea. And cell theory has a couple specific parts to it. One of the first parts to it is that everything that is alive is or is made up of cells. So everything alive is or is made of cells. And now that's not just some idea, right? We know that is true. So cells, or another part of cell theory, a cell is the smallest unit of life. And so we're going to have a variety of different types of cells. This course primarily focuses on eukaryotic cells, the type of cells that make up our bodies, the types of cells that make up plants, fungi, protists. Not as much of prokaryotic cells, which are the bacteria and the archaea, but that's a microbiology, a different course that focuses in on what makes those types of cells unique. But we'll talk a little bit about each type, what makes them different, what the definition is of a prokaryotic versus eukaryotic cell. But of all the smallest things that we have that are alive, the cell is the unit that we have. And that's kind of why this course is focused in on cells. Because if we really want to understand life, if you want to understand organisms and organs and organ systems within an organism, or how organisms interact with other organisms, really can start off at the lowest, most simplistic level. And in some ways, it's really not simple. It's fairly complex, actually, but it is the level of the cell. All right? And so that's what this whole course is really about, is about cells. So everything alive is or is made up of cells. A cell is the smallest unit of life, are two major parts of what we call the cell theory. All right. And in studying cells themselves, we're going to find that we have ways in which we have to define what we need to define life, as well. So to define life, a virus is a particle that is smaller than a cell, typically, though there are some super tiny cells that are a little bit bigger than the biggest viruses. But in general, viruses are smaller than cells. And a virus is not considered to be alive because it lacks certain characteristics or properties of what we call or define as life. All right. So life itself has to be able to reproduce. Right, for something to be alive. So bacterial cells can divide and make more cells. Your cells can undergo mitosis and divide and make more of themselves. So that's another part of the cell theory, is that all cells come from other cells. So cells divide to produce more cells. All right, so we need reproduction, and then as organisms get more complicated and you have many cells making up an organism and many complex systems making up an organism, then we have ways in which single cells are produced that unite to give rise to a unique cell that will divide and then create a whole multicellular organism. But it's still cells giving rise to other cells. We kind of can boil it down in some ways to that really simplistic kind of explanation. Cells as well, also, in addition to having to reproduce, they have to have some form of metabolism. So what's going to happen is that within a cell, there are going to be all sorts of activities taking place. For those activities to take place, it's going to cost energy. And a cell has to have a way of storing energy, cycling that energy from one form to another form, and then using that energy to carry out the activities that keep the cell alive, that allow the cell to then divide and make more copies of itself. So cells have to be able to do really these things in order to be alive. You can have something that is a very small particle that may contain some chemicals that can have reactions taking place, but it wouldn't be sort of a full metabolism. So it wouldn't really be alive. So these are the three main tenets of cell theory. Okay, so all cells come from other cells. Cells are the smallest unit of life, and everything alive is or is made up of cells. So make sure you know those three things, and that makes up what we call cell theory. Make sure that a theory is not just an idea, that it maybe is or is not, that we know these things to be true. We accept these things as fact. All right. And so in science, a theory is an explanation that is supported by evidence. Right? We use this term in a different way. If you use this term in the traditional colloquial sense that people talk about things being just a theory, you will be marked wrong on an exam. You will be asked this question, and this question will be weighted more sometimes than some of the other questions, because it's really an important idea that non-scientists just don't get, and it causes a lot of problems in science as well, as far as understanding the importance of what people know in science. So the next thing we're going to do when talking about cells is really look at the difference between prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. So I'm going to introduce this, and then we're going to kind of stop so the videos don't get very long, and break it into two separate videos. So we'll start off here by just outlining what we're going to talk about, and then I'll break it, and then we'll start another video. So cells are really put into two types. We have things called prokaryotic, which I've already mentioned. And then we have another type of cells that are called eukaryotic. Okay, so prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Now you can see if you look at those terms. Here you go. Karyo, K-A-R-Y-O. Has anybody heard of that or know what that means? Karyo. Right. So karyo, in this sense, stands for nuclear. Okay, so karyo. And now, in the beginning of the course, really, we're going to do this introduction, then it's going to go back to a slightly different topic. To build a cell, we're going to really start off with the chemistry of the cell. So we're going to start with carbon atoms, putting atoms together, carbons with carbons and hydrogens and oxygens, and build sugars and lipids and proteins and the molecules that structure the cell. And then we'll put them together to build the structures of the cell, to build the membranes of the cell, the membranes that will create compartments where these reactions can take place, the molecules that will comprise the DNA and RNA that will be used in carrying out the genetic code information to direct the cell, to reproduce the cell. And we'll look at all these sorts of topics. And we're ultimately going to start off, though, really with atoms. And atoms have a nucleus, right? But this nuclear sense we're talking about is the nucleus of a cell. And so that term nuclear, an atom can have a nucleus, a cell can have a nucleus. It really just means, the core of something. So it's at its core. So several things can have a nucleus, but they're not all the same. There's different things within them. So this is a cell without a core, say, for example, without a nucleus. In the eukaryote, so U means true, so they're going to have a true nucleus. So these are the true nucleus. And the prokaryotes lack a nucleus, and so they're kind of considered pro or pre or before, a nucleus. So we'll just say no nucleus. And that one characteristic there, that having a nucleus or not in the cell, is really the key thing that separates them. Now, there are going to be a whole list of other things that separate these as two different types of cells, but that's really the main one. That's where obviously the name comes from, and that's what we're going to focus on. So the next topic is going to be prokaryotic versus eukaryotic, and then I'll get into a little bit about the size issue, because there's going to be one of the differences between them is going to be size. So I'll talk a little bit about the size and something called surface to volume ratio. And pretty much after that, then it'll get just right into, we'll go back to the beginning, really, which is the chemistry, to start to make these cells and build them from scratch, to build them from the atoms on up. Okay? So this is just the first introduction. This is cell theory and a couple terms. And now we're going to get into prokaryotic, eukaryotic in the next short lecture.